So basically, what I'm going to talk about is kind of the evolution of social enterprise. So does everyone know what a social enterprise is? Okay, social enterprise is basically a business where people and profit are equally important, if not people even more. So the impact that you make in the world, but you're also making money, right? Because that allows for sustainability. It means that the difference you do today can happen in 50 or 100 years from now. It's not just a charitable model, which is a handout, but it's often thinking about a hand up. So it does have that sustainability side of it. Okay. Basically I'll start where we are today. Actually, I will go back to the spiritual side, sorry. So I worked at the United Church of Canada as Director of Innovation for a decade. And so you can say, Director of Innovation, what? Like, for a church, for a denomination. I was actually the first Director of Innovation for a denomination in all of North America. So the United Church of Canada, again, was just really, really forward-thinking. If you think about it, when we unified, becoming united was one of the most transformational, courageous things that almost any denomination, and it took 3 denominations to be courageous. And so having a Director of Innovation to keep on pushing the envelope was also courageous. When I was the Director of Innovation, we really started to realize that the social enterprise piece is tied to faith. It is actually a spiritual practice by itself, and many of our churches and communities of faith are turning into social enterprises. You've probably heard of the idea of a community hub, right? So, and oftentimes they might even create a cafe that makes money. So there's different ways of doing it. But what we've actually seen is, in terms of fresh expressions and new ministries, it's often not just a social entrepreneur, it's someone called a spiritual entrepreneur. Someone who's actually running a business for a spiritual underpinning, which is quite lovely. So we're starting to see that happen quite a bit. And so when I was Director of Innovation, we were seeing these spiritual entrepreneurs starting to pop up. One church actually started a hairdressing company in the church. Another one actually had a party bus. Another one did food trucks. So food ministry. So all these really unique ways of thinking about business, but then how do you have the underpinnings of people and spirit? So in 2016, we ran the Social Innovation Challenge. We supported hundreds of social enterprises getting off the ground, all within the United Church of Canada. And we started to get known as the United Church of Canada by the federal government as actually a catalyst for social innovation in Canada. What happened is that the federal government said, you know what, social innovation is important, it's real. And the CRA said, if the United Church thinks social enterprise is a thing, we should probably be worried about it too. So it's kind of neat that when we sit in our pews and we think about, like, are we making an impact in the world? As the United Church of Canada, we actually are pushing the envelope right now on pieces like this. Because when we think about something different as a traditional institution, we are actually causing systemic change, which is really, really cool. So, as you can imagine, Director of Innovation within a church for 10 years, there's a point at which I shouldn't be at the church anymore, right? Because at some point, the change that I'm affecting probably needs to get outside of the church, right? Because there's always an us versus them. But real community is us. There is no us or them. Right? And so what I started to see is that me affecting change within the United Church of Canada wasn't going to be enough. And that going outside and starting something new, being in deep partnership and being seen as just the way that business should happen was the way to go. So for the last 3 years, I've been talking about social finance. And social finance is basically all your investments, but again, having that people and profit piece together. So it's called impact investing. So many of you guys know what ESG is. So you have your environmental, social, and governance side of impact investing. But impact investing isn't just being reactive. So you're doing harm if you don't have ESG in your investments, right? So it's trying to not do harm. But impact is proactively doing good. So most impact investing in Canada right now is actually debt. So charities are loaning money to businesses that are doing good, but then they get an interest rate all the time. Again, to me, that's an us versus them, right? Because I give you money and you owe me. But there's this new idea of impact investors doing equity. So actually charities owning businesses and infusing their culture and values into a business to do future good. So that is actually the social enterprise that we're talking about, thanks Jennifer, is called Just Like Family. Just Like Family Home Care is a business that I bought on May 1st of last year with 51% of our ownership is by charities. So can you imagine? We have 3 charities that decided to invest in buying a home care business that has a national reach. So it's taking charity to social enterprise to buying a for-profit business with equity, not just debt, that is now having this ongoing longevity in terms of what the mission can be. So how did this happen? As Director of Innovation with the United Church of Canada, I had one church who decided, I want to buy a franchise. I want to test social enterprise. Just like Broadview United Church on Vancouver Island 3 years ago bought a franchise of Just Like Family. They bought Victoria. And as Director of Innovation, they said, Carla, can we do this? I go, listen, we'll give you a grant. Let's figure out if we can do it. They got a lawyer to figure out all the governance structures and how it could work. And they bought the business. They used their own endowment. It cost them $37,000 to buy the franchise. And they're like, okay, now what? I go, Carla, we need a line of credit. So actually the United Church of Canada gave this Broadview United Church a line of credit to grow the home care business in Victoria. In the first year, they went from $0 to $250,000 in revenue. In year 2, they grew it to 1.2, and in year 3, they grew it to 1.7. That's real social enterprise. And a church owning a home care business. So it's not just the revenue, let's talk about the people. That's literally hundreds of seniors aging in place that wouldn't have been aging in place at home. Now, because it was owned by Broadview United Church, they decided to pay living wage and had a health spending account for caregivers. You've probably heard in the news about home care caregivers, PSWs, HCAs not being respected, not having a quality of life in their work, not even being able to afford their rent. With a living wage and with a health spending account, they actually raised the bar of what PSWs look like in Victoria. So I remember one of the minister there, Cheryl Black, she's like, I never expected this to be a ripple effect. She like, I knew we'd help seniors and that would be, we'd support seniors. I never thought that it would have such a huge impact on the caregivers. But one day, her next door neighbor said, my daughter just got this amazing job. And she's like, really? Where's it with? She goes, Just Like Family Home Care. And the minister's like, oh, wow. And this person didn't know that that was owned by Broadview United Church. So that's a question, does that matter? But that's okay, right? So it was really neat to see that that happened. Now, when speaking to the caregivers, because everything was done with dignity and respect and with a social justice lens, and really a stakeholder view rather than a target audience view, our customers are nicer. Our customers self-select us better, and our caregivers are happier, and it just has this upward spiral of community. Plus, remember, $250,000, 1.2, 1.7. So they did such a good job in Victoria, they bought Nanaimo as well. And so as Director of Innovation, I supported them in that process. And they continue to grow the business. Now you can imagine, so as a franchise system works, they basically have locations all over the country. Broadview United Church owns 2 of them. And so the person who started Just Like Family Home Care, he'd been running it since 2010. And he got really, really tired, right? Like, it's a lot of work to get something from 0 to 29 locations. Now, guess who was his shining star? Broadview United Church had grown the fastest out of any other franchise because it's rooted in community. You know, they put people first in their business model, and it was authentic in how that worked. And so they grew fastest. They were one of the top 3 performers right out of the gate. So the founder of Just Like Family went back to them and said, would you buy me? Would you buy National? So every single time Broadview United Church had a question like this, they kept on calling me as Director of Innovation. So I was very privileged and blessed to have that role and to be, you know, in that deep relationship with them. And in this case, they go, Carla, we can't buy this without your support, and actually we want you to leave the United Church of Canada and become a spiritual entrepreneur in this role. And so I was called into the next thing. I felt I had really embedded a lot of innovation and experimented. The team at the United Church of Canada continued to really step in. And so I was ready for the next challenge, and I would call it a leap of faith. And so really, could we raise the money to buy 29 locations as a home care business, transform home care in Canada, transform franchising in Canada, and potentially have an impact on healthcare in Canada? Now, I will tell you, I know nothing about home care, I know nothing about franchising, I know nothing about healthcare at the start. So it was a genuine leap of faith that I went into this. If any of you know anything about buying a business, it usually takes months. And if any of you know anything about getting debt to buy a business, it's a minimum of 90 to 120 days, so 3 to 4 months. From the moment the opportunity came to us on January 21st until the moment we actually owned the business and I was the CEO, it was 113 days. It's actually a miracle. From what I've heard from people who've done this work in the past is they wouldn't have thought that was possible. They would have assumed it to be impossible from the get-go and not even tried. Lucky for me, remember, I don't know anything, so I didn't know it was impossible and I went for it anyway. So what ended up happening is I reached out immediately to 187 charities. And I said, I think this is aligned with our strategy, our vision. We're going to disrupt what impact investing looks like in Canada. Because this is new. Charities don't buy. We don't acquire businesses with equity. So I reached out to 187. Most people said that they didn't know if it was aligned, they didn't think they could move fast enough, or they just didn't get it. But I had 3 charities who could move fast enough, who were aligned, and really, really got it. And I would say actually a year from today ago, I still was missing $250,000 of the money I needed to buy it. But I had faith, based on how far I had come, that at that point we had gotten far enough it would be fine. So we ended up buying it with 12 investors. I'll actually admit, quite a few, out of the 12, 9 are individuals, 3 are charities, and out of the 9, many of them are ministers. Ministers actually saw that this was spiritual entrepreneurship. This is something that they actually wanted to invest in and push the envelope on. Isn't that beautiful? That another way for them to live out their faith, which is just a different way of thinking about doing it. And again, it's not a donation, this is an investment. So on May 1st, we bought the whole thing. The neat thing about franchising, I think, is that most people think that franchising is trying to get as much money as possible or using other people's money to grow. I didn't know anything about it, so I came into it thinking, what happens if it's about collaboration? What happens if we stay curious and it's about learning? What happens if it's not about win-lose, me versus you? What happens if we change capitalism into win-win? So I came in, and working with the United Church of Canada in transformation, you can imagine I did a lot of change management. So meeting my 21 owners of 29 territories felt like this is light work. This is going to be easy. Because I had always had a lot of informal power, but I had never had formal and informal power. So I came in as the CEO, and I met them. The first 60 days, all I did was ask questions. And on day 61, I signed 7 agreements with 7 different suppliers based on the feedback that I had heard to move the whole business forward. Now, there's a few pieces. So since then, I've actually sold another 6 territories. We've matched all of our net income goals on our initial business plan, but we've actually exceeded in terms of our revenue targets, and we've actually put in more infrastructure into the business than we expected. The other pieces of things that ended up happening is out of my last 6 territories that I've sold, only 1 is owned by a white person. And in each case, when we meet with people, it's very relational. In fact, all of our new franchise partners have said, I talked to your competition, but no one is as slow pace, relational. It feels more transactional. It's more about where's the money compared to our flow. And for me, they're partners. right? They're marrying me. So I don't want to have, one date and like close the deal. So you can imagine in business, having relationship and people first is a completely different way of looking at this. And if it had only been debt that the charities put in, it would be us versus them. But the win-win of us working together, they actually are on my team. They're on my board. And what I love about it is that they keep on pushing us to do better. So in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, what are the transformations that we've seen, and what does my board continue to push me on? So like I said, in the last 6, previous to that, 2/3 of our franchise partners were white. But 2/3 of them are also female-led. That's what we bought. Out of the last 6 moving forward, like I said, only we have 2 Filipinos who purchased. So Regina in Saskatoon is a Filipina nurse, owns Saskatoon, and then a couple, both from the Philippines, and the wife is actually a church administrator. Isn't that beautiful? So that's them. And then in Waterloo, we have a Nigerian man and his wife bought Waterloo. South Etobicoke is another Nigerian couple. She's a pharmacist and he owns a transportation company. And they have like a lot of grit, so they're gonna be my first pharmacist in the network. Remember, I call it network, not system. So there's these little pieces. Then I have a Pakistani woman who owns it, not her husband, just her. And she's a personal support worker. So to have PSW ownership within home care is also a game changer. Like who owns it matters. And then in North York, that is our white couple, beautiful people, and the wife is actually a co-owner with her husband and also a PSW. So we continue to grow out who our network is, and all of these people, they understand that we're 51% owned by charities. They understand about the systemic change that we wish to make and what narrative they're part of. They understand that we want to raise the bar of home care, and when we do that and raise it, everyone else will be forced to do it. And they're part of that vision with us. Like we believe changing the narrative of home care, like we have a vision statement. I have a theory of change as a for-profit, right? Some interesting things that other people wouldn't do. So the other thing that we've also started to disrupt, so home care, disrupting is one piece. The franchise system about how it's relational is another piece. Typically the way you do franchising is you get a franchise broker who finds someone randomly for you. They do all their PPC, like pay-per-click online and Google search. They find someone who wants to be an entrepreneur and they go, what about just like family? And then you pay thousands of dollars for this lead, even though you just get a name. It's transactional, it's no relationship. So what I've decided to do is, what happens if we change that into relationships? So I've reached out to a Black-led organization named SETSI. Their name is Social Economy Through Social Inclusion. And we've worked with them of who are Black entrepreneurs who may or may not have the means that we can support to buy these territories and to be in partnership with us. In some cases, they have had the means, and in some cases, we're actually creating our own financing, social finance structure to empower and ensure that people who are great entrepreneurs but might not have the means to buy a territory can. So I hope you can see, it's not like one disruption. It's once you get into the rabbit hole, all the other, like I had no idea how transactional franchising was. I had no idea that we didn't have a vision statement. You know, I didn't know if everyone had the same values. So I'll tell you what we did in 2022 to 2023. In 2022, all I did was change culture. I spoke to them, I asked questions, I responded. And when we did that, we came down to 3 core values that I wanted everyone to be holding, but I think they all did. Number one, well, it's all people's first, is really what it is. We really wanted to empower people. We wanted to make sure that we're lifting everyone up, lifting up the franchise partners to feel heard and that we respond to them, lifting up the caregivers to go the extra mile and to be supported in that. And then of course, dignity and respect and empowerment of our clients, the seniors. but we also cared about collaboration. They weren't working together. So let's collaborate. What does that look like? And then the other one is learning. I'm new, remember, I know nothing, right? I know nothing about anything. So I come in, I'm like, let's learn, right? But let's recognize that I have some gifts, you have some gifts, and everyone has a secret power that we can all use together in a network. So that's pretty much those pieces. Now from there into 2023, what we're doing is I'm now rolling out like our strategy and moving forward on raising the bar of highest quality, most responsive, and the most customer-centric home care business in Canada is really my goal. So it's kind of neat that I can do that when I have patient capital of my charitable investors who care about both people and profit. So none of my investors expect a dividend for 3 years, but then at that point they do. So imagine I have a 3-year runway to do things the right way. It's a completely different way of doing business. So the exciting thing about this is that this is an experiment that the federal government's now watching because they know me from my work with the United Church of Canada. We have so many other nonprofits and charities who've heard about my story. So on March 20th, I'm meeting with 20 charities who want to see if we can create an impact fund to acquire other businesses through a coalition of investors. Because this, what I just did, was the first social acquisition by a coalition of charities. So what happens if we created a fund to buy more of them and did it in this way? Enforce living wage, continue to raise the bar. So we'll see what happens, but at this point, with 20 investors, all with a couple $1 million under their belts, we're looking for our next acquisition, even before my first year of buying this first thing. I think in terms of temptation number 2, the important thing that has been really, that has worked really well is it hasn't been about me. It's really been about the co-learning and the collaboration and the empowerment of others. And I think at this point, when we talk about creating a $100 million fund to buy other businesses, I've said to everyone, I go, I'm not gonna be the one running it. I'm happy to bring players in and to be the experiment that makes it possible. But I'm not gonna run this. And so by doing one thing and then getting it out of the way, I think is an important value or tenet of the work that I'm doing. Because it's not about me, it's about let's co-create what it is, and whoever the leaders are, I know it's not me, but I'll support the space with you. So I'm really excited about the future. I have no idea how much more impact and change we're going to do, but I can tell you at the Canadian Franchise Association National AGM, basically, in April, I'm one of their speakers. So it's going to be called, my session's called Franchising for Good. And if you think about it, I've been running this as of March 1st for 10 months. So the systems change that have already happened, who knows what's next?